We have a set of policymakers across the continent that are developing policy responses and national AI strategies. But in South Africa, which is one of the more kind of privileged African countries economically, the majority of people don't know what AI is. We can extrapolate that across the continent, there are major, major knowledge gaps.
If you were to invest in a water solution or in energy supply, what do we know about the difference that makes in the communities that received that intervention or that new access relative to those that did not?
So few people have an understanding about how AI may be impacting their lives. There's little opportunity for people to prepare for the kinds of labour displacements or labour changes that might take place.
Welcome back to African. We are all aware that AI is the breakthrough innovation of our time, which redefines all disciplines from art to neuroscience. Some say that its impact will be even greater than that of the Industrial Revolution. In the fourth and final theme of Series 2 of African, we will focus on AI's impact on development. AI will certainly have many positive consequences in this area, and Pharaoh Foundation has already started to reap its benefits. Geospatial analysis, which is the AI-enabled usage of satellite data to access hyperlocal sociodemographic indicators, has given the foundation an opportunity to better understand the sources and types of water supply that are currently available in Somaliland, so that we can get a better idea of where and how we need to intervene through our water mission. We're also using a machine learning model of dam usage to monitor visitors to our dams, and that will be the subject of our next episode. But what we do not know with precision is what the final balance of AI's impact will be, not least because there are many philosophical challenges that come from its interface with the difficult contexts of developing countries, especially in fragile and conflict-ridden areas. So today, I have brought in two experts to help us shed some light on the fascinating interplay between AI and development. What's going to be particularly interesting, I hope, is that one of my guests works directly on a specific application of AI, which is geospatial AI, in a corporate setting, while the second one is an academic who will take a step back and give us more of a theoretical framework to understand the governance and ethical questions surrounding AI in developing countries. So we have Vivek Sakrani, who is Vice President of Product and Solutions for Atlas AI, a company which blends cutting-edge science with planetary-scale geospatial infrastructure to unlock geospatial AI for every enterprise. Vivek shapes Atlas AI's portfolio of development analytics services. He brings more than a decade of experience in systems planning, design, and investment advisory for development projects in energy, transport, water, ICT, and urban built environments. Vivek was previously the Global Director for Infrastructure Analytics at CPCS, a management consulting firm specializing in infrastructure. Among his past clients, there's the World Bank, the African Union Commission, GIZ, private firms, ministries, and agencies. He has a PhD in systems engineering and a master's in technology and policy, both from MIT. Our second guest is Rachel Adams, who is the founder and CEO of the Global Center on AI Governance. She's the author of The New Empire of AI, The Future of Global Inequality. She is an assistant research professor at Cambridge University's Leverhulme Center for the Future of Intelligence and an honorary research fellow of the Ethics Lab at the University of Cape Town. She previously served as the Director of AI and Global Programs at Research ICT Africa. She holds degrees in English literature, international human rights law, and philosophy. So she will give us a humanist view on AI's impact in developing countries. So let's kick off the discussion with a question to Vivek. Vivek, AI is revolutionizing the data we can extract from traditionally data-poor developing countries. So to what extent do you think that there is still a need to triangulate satellite data with on-the-ground research? And could you please give us an example where there was significant value added from combining the two sources of data?
Thank you, Francesca, and thank you to the Foundation for having us. So I'd like to start with a couple of concepts that I think might be helpful for our audience today to follow along the arc and what sort of brought us to this breakthrough moment in geospatial AI in particular. So let me begin with Earth observation. So Earth observation is the science, the practice, and the craft of observing the Earth from space and making sense of the patterns that we see. And what do I mean by see? And here, in some cases, we mean quite literally the ability to observe and take pictures of the planet with very powerful cameras that have been installed on satellites. And these types of images are helpful to notice the jagged coastlines of our countries, clusters of trees like the Amazon, maple leaves in the fall in the Northern Hemisphere. And so it's visible information. In other cases, Earth observation also helps us understand information that's not necessarily visible, temperature, or air pollution and air quality, for example, can be sensed from satellite sensors as well. Let me then switch to artificial intelligence, which is quite a broad field. It's the science and engineering of building systems and machines that can perform tasks, not just any tasks, but useful tasks for communities and for society that often require some form of human intelligence. So being able to make decisions like a human would do in a complex situation. And some examples of this are learning. So can the system learn how to predict the weather later this afternoon or tomorrow? Understanding spoken and written language to support translation and communication applications, and then also recognizing other complex patterns in the urban environment, for example. And the system can be as simple as the laptops that we use or even our smartphones. And at this point, it's helpful to focus in on a particular subfield that's very central to the Earth observation capabilities. And this is the subfield of computer vision. So it's being able to teach our cameras and our machines to look at an image and extract some useful information from it. And examples of this are being able to tell the shape of a figure in an image, or understand whether the computer is looking at a picture of a cat or a dog. It's one of the canonical examples in computer vision. Machine learning, on the other hand, is a term that is used quite frequently and often interchangeably with artificial intelligence. And in this case, we use machine learning for specific applications, and I can provide two examples: classification and regression. Classification is the method that allows us to categorize and place ideas in the appropriate categories. So for example, imagine we're doing a taste test and I have a blindfold on and I've never tasted a mango or an apple. And as I'm tasting it, if you were to tell me that you're tasting a mango, hopefully the next time I try it, I'll know what a mango tastes like and I'll be able to put that in its appropriate category. So that's really an example from classification. From regression, here we're really in the business of measurement and prediction. Let me use another cooking analogy. So imagine I'm baking cookies and I do many batches and I try them at different points in time. So if I pull the tray out too early, they may be underbaked. If I go too long, they might be too crisp or burnt. And so getting it just right is a question of degree. And by using a timer
and just a systematic process, I'm able to understand how long to bake something for to get them just right. So that's an example from regression. And so these are the two sort of broad types of applications that we can use machine learning and computer vision on this corpus of Earth observation imagery. So all of the sensing information that we get from satellites. And so let me now come back to the heart of your question, which is about the need to triangulate this information in the field. So as I've provided a couple of examples, without the feedback on what is an apple or what is a mango, or how long should I bake the cookies for, I have no way to calibrate or tell the information that I'm seeing from satellite imagery and connect that to the field observation. So field observation continues to be vital and critical for calibration of our instruments and our procedures. Let me reflect on a consistent example that we've worked on with respect to the Sustainable Development Goal 1, no poverty. So this is the very first sustainable goal, and with the global objective of eradicating poverty or zero poverty. And to understand how to eliminate poverty, we first need to know where it exists, what it looks like, and who suffers from it, and to what degree. And so more than a decade ago, our researchers at Atlas AI set out to answer this question. Can we use Earth observation and machine learning to understand the well-being of every community on the planet so we could perhaps predict and assess the degree of poverty that exists and the populations and communities that affects? Now, this is an interesting economic question in any context, really, but what makes it a really frontier question in technology and the use of data is that we ask this question for data-sparse environments, of which the African continent is a good characteristic example. Often, many of the countries that we work in do not have recent information on the well-being of their communities. These communities are often inaccessible and in far-off locations, and there may not have been a census or a survey that helped understand their level of well-being. And so in this particular application, we have used what we think of as gold standard surveys, the demographic and health surveys by the erstwhile USAID, or the Living Standards Measurement Study by the World Bank, to get that valuable and vital field information, the ground reference, as we would call it, and then connect that with what we're able to see in Earth observation and train our models to better understand how to relate information from Earth observation to an estimate of poverty in the field. And by training very specific models called neural networks, we're now able to estimate the level of well-being for immense areas of the planet. For example, the entire African continent or all of South Asia. And by a process of iteration and continuous improvement, we've been able to assure the quality of these models to make sure that we're getting information that's relevant and accurate for on-the-ground applications. Just one example of how this information is being used today, the United Nations Food and Agriculture Organization is using this information to create vulnerability maps so that they can target their interventions and programs for food security, as well as agricultural assistance in many countries.
Very impressive, Vivek. And thank you so much for the lexicon at the beginning, because I think, a lot of people just use these terms and they don't really know what they mean, including myself. So thank you so much. Great. I don't know, Rachel, if you wanted to come in on Vivek's points, but otherwise I'll just carry on to the next question.
Well, maybe I can jump in because I think Vivek has really outlined just how exciting the promise this technology is for solving some of the most critical challenges that we face across the African continent. And I think the excitement around geospatial data is really one of accessing places that traditionally governments
really struggled to understand what was going on and to deliver the kinds of services they need. So I think I wanted to just give one example from a government that I have worked a little bit with, who has been able to draw on geospatial data. This is the government of Togo in West Africa. I think it was just shortly after COVID, when we know this had a really, really significant impact on poverty levels globally, but particularly on the African continent. And they were able to use this data to determine which communities were most in need of cash transfers. So I think this is really exciting. I think it's really important to remember that even geolocation data, even geospatial data, and the kind of possibilities these provide, there is still the need for kind of ground level access routes to these communities. So I think often we get very kind of excited about the possibilities of digital interventions, but without access to water, without access to food, without roads, etc., there are still kind of critical issues that require more kind of direct support. So I always get very interested when we think about how do we join these kinds of capabilities up with humanitarian assistance or delivery of critical government services on the ground as well.
Great point, Rachel. Okay, so following on from this, Vivek, in this specific context of the developing world, how agile do your information solutions need to be? If you can give us a specific example of a development project where agility of the solution has been critical.
Yeah, this is a really important question, and agility can be thought of in many ways. In one sense, agility, the amount of agility we need might need to be enough to be able to move at the salience or pace of consequence. So how quickly do we need to bring information and good data to bear on an application or a solution? In a humanitarian context, in some sense, this might be within 24 hours or as soon as possible, really. In other cases, we may be okay with waiting and seeing as to what happens. And so the nature of agility is a little bit different. And let me provide a few different examples. So in the aftermath of the Turkey and Syria earthquake, which was quite a tragic incident several years ago, we were able to publish our maps of built environment within 24 hours of the incident to enable first responders to reconstruct their maps and their image of where the buildings and structures were so that they could engage in the process of clearing the rubble and rescuing workers. So that's an example of rapid humanitarian assistance, and that can extend to flooding and fires and other similar incidents. In other cases, we often have a little bit more flexibility and time to be able to deliver information. So one of the projects we worked on was to support the UN and the WHO in the prioritized delivery of vaccines during the COVID case, where we were able to look at the entire African continent and assess communities in terms of their vulnerability. And then, as Rachel correctly mentioned, having the on-the-ground ability to be able to access some of these rural and distant communities and inform a prioritization plan, including the logistics and delivery of the vaccines. So which airports should be utilized? What are the best routes to access some distant communities? Estimates of the population in those regions. So in that type of solution, it may take a little bit more time to bring information to bear, but the consequences are significant and the stakes are high. And so allowing a little bit of time to do that is also valuable. A third example where we may need to wait and observe a little bit is to understand the impact of a particular intervention, which is a big question in development economics. For example, if you were to invest in a water solution or in energy supply, what do we know about the difference that makes in the communities that received that intervention or that new access relative to those that did not? And in such a case, we often deploy our system in monitoring fashion. And so here we baseline when the investment went into place and observe communities throughout the process of receiving that intervention and well into the period of beneficial use, which could be 3 or 5 years. And we've looked at this in the case of the energy sector in Uganda and in the Democratic Republic of the Congo, as well as for fiber and ICT investments in the African continent. And going back after about a few years, we're able to very specifically quantify the difference that makes. For example, in Uganda, we observed that communities that received access to grid electrification grew economically at twice the rate of similar communities that did not receive that beneficial intervention. And so in this case, the burden is really more one of rigor and a high bar for generating that evidence to inform future investments. And so the observation period might be several years. With Earth's observation and machine learning, we do have this incredible ability to go backwards in time and use archival information as well to construct these quasi-experiments as the economics community loves to do, and then connect that with new mathematical techniques from randomized control trials as well as other econometric techniques to address these questions. A final example that I'll use is predictive cases, which again combines some of these settings where you may need to observe for a long period of time to build up data and observation of a system, but only to be able to predict in a very narrow time frame the likelihood of an event, of an adverse event. So an early warning system for food insecurity is a great example, or disease surveillance for outbreaks of infectious disease risks in certain pockets is another. And so in this case, there's this balance between consistent systematic observation and then the need to deliver the insights very quickly to those on the ground who could use it. And to Rachel's elegant point, those that are empowered to participate and support the communities in delivering the solutions.
Rachel, any thoughts on that?
I mean, I think these are really exciting examples. One of the things I was going to ask Vivek, we've been having a lot of conversations and debate recently about the new emphasis on large language models. And when you're a government, we work a lot with governments across Africa, they have to make critical decisions about what investments to prioritize. And large language models, as we know, is really kind of costly on compute and energy. And so it's a big bet for governments that have limited resources to say, okay, it's really worth your while to spend X many millions. We know the US and others are spending in the billions to create the infrastructure in order to enable local large language model development, particularly in local languages. So listening to Vivek and all that you've been speaking about, predictive models and computer vision, it's really refreshing to hear just how important those kind of, I don't want to say traditional, but previous generation of really kind of advanced and complex AI technologies are for helping solve some of these critical challenges. So I guess a question to you, Vivek, is around large language models and whether they are a tool that, and generative AI technologies more generally, is a tool that you use within your suite. And if not so much, is there kind of, do you anticipate coming to use it more often? And what would your advice to African governments be in determining what kind of technologies to prioritize creating the infrastructure for?
Yeah, that's a fascinating question, and you're absolutely right that artificial intelligence as a broad field has demonstrated many successful applications over the last few decades, and the most recent being the incredibly powerful capabilities of large language models. So at Atlas AI, we do a lot of internal research, both within the company as well as with many academic collaborators globally, to understand where generative techniques could interface with some of our classical methods in Earth observation and machine learning. And there's incredible potential for what's known as multimodal or multi-sensor artificial intelligence. And what I mean by that is, if Earth observation is about pictures and images taken from satellites or other types of measurements, there may be valuable information that's contained in natural and spoken language in how communities think about themselves in space and in time. There may also be valuable information embedded in reports that have been published or other statistical bulletins and surveys. So what if we could combine these classical techniques with these emerging capabilities from generative AI and put to similar models, or at least use them together in an intelligent and thoughtful manner? So that's really the promise and the frontier of geospatial artificial intelligence as well. There have been recent models, for example, by NASA and collaborators like IBM and a few leading academics, as well as by technology companies like Google, who have made available in open access fashion the ability to use these multimodal foundation models that could assist the community and governments as well. So there's incredible capability. We're very active in this space in studying these. We have not made these available in production capacity. What I mean by that is we do not currently offer this as a solution for a few different reasons. We have a lot to learn about the performance of these models in practice, under the day-to-day rigors and stresses of practice and policymaking, and where these models actually hold up and where they fail. But it's quite promising. For example, I've spoken with many entrepreneurs in the African continent lately who have invested their effort and also sought funds to customize these models for the hundreds of local languages and tribal languages, and often diminishing dialects that would need to be preserved and archived. And so the technology is now providing the interface to local governments to be able to better work with and offer solutions to their own communities. And we envision that in the near future, these could be augmented with the rich context and information from geospatial sources as well. I'm not sure I would be able to go so far as to offer advice, but perhaps some of the practices that we've seen that are bearing out today are to be able to localize these models and really understand what local information is available to further enrich or fine-tune these models for specific applications. Another type of approach might be to invest a little bit more consistently in sectors that could be beneficial. For example, agriculture, and helping farmers better understand management practices, or sending them informational bulletins on when they should adjust or modulate their field activities to maximize the quality of the harvest and the yield for a particular season, or for public health applications where pregnant women or young mothers could send in a message and receive information that's most locally relevant for the particular time in their communities on certain access to health, or programs that might be offered, for example, immunization programs or nutrition programs as well. So there are a variety of localized, specific, and tremendously beneficial applications that governments could consider investing in and testing for their constituencies.
Excellent, Vivek. Thank you. Now I'd like us maybe to take a little step back, and look at the philosophical aspects. Question to you, Rachel, um, in terms of the use of information generated through AI. I'd like to explore what AI means really for conflict-ridden areas, and how often does the data fall into the wrong hands, and in general, if you can just tell us what constitutes responsible AI in your view.
Well, thank you, Francesca. I think those are a set of very interesting questions. I want to start off with the first one around what does AI mean in diverse African contexts. And we don't have a kind of clear picture of this, but at the Global Center on AI Governance, we have just completed and published the first kind of rigorous public perception survey on artificial intelligence in South Africa. So we worked with the Human Sciences Research Council, which is the local government sponsored research agency that has been conducting a social attitude survey in South Africa for many, many years to design a module which asked questions around what do people think about AI? What do people know about AI? Where do they get their information from? Do they feel largely positive about it? What are their concerns? And we interviewed over 3,000 people face to face from every walk of life in South Africa and every language group. And the kind of headline finding was 2 out of 3 South Africans don't know what AI is. So 33% had no idea what AI was and hadn't heard of it. Another 34% had heard of the term but didn't know what it meant. So these are kind of really crucial insights that let us have a much clearer picture of the reality around the fact that on the one hand, there's a huge excitement and promise about how this technology is going to transform people's lives, particularly in Africa. We have a set of policymakers across the continent that are developing policy responses and national AI strategies. But in South Africa, which is one of the more kind of privileged African countries economically, the majority of people don't know what AI is. We can extrapolate that across the continent, there are major, major knowledge gaps. So I think this in and of itself is an ethical risk. Now, it's an ethical risk partly because people are not involved in designing or shaping or having a say in these technologies that are purportedly going to change their lives. But it also means that people don't know their rights. And it means they're really kind of vulnerable to various forms of exploitation, whether that's the extraction of local indigenous knowledge to help make applications better, and those applications don't always feed back to benefiting communities directly, or whether it's through the spread of misinformation and disinformation that people are unable to recognize or don't know that AI has been a part of. So when we're thinking about fragile states and we're thinking about places across the continent where there is conflict, much of the kind of introduction to this kind of conflict or the kinds of conversation and discourse that surround and inflame it is taking place online and is being mediated through algorithmically structured sources. So this, coupled with the fact that most people don't have a clear idea of how AI is impacting their lives or what their rights might be, makes for a very, very difficult context. Knowledge is power. And so one of the most important things, this is why AI is so valuable, because it provides insight and knowledge. But one of the kind of foundational things when we're thinking about, well, what does responsible use of AI mean within an African context, is that we need to empower people with knowledge to make better decisions about how they engage with AI technologies in their everyday lives. And this is a responsibility that is clearly on all kinds of AI actors that may be working across the continent. It's of course a priority for policymakers when they're thinking about what are the kinds of policies that are going to enable democratic public use AI in our countries. They need to think about AI literacy and awareness programs, AI education. I'm going to get to the skills point in a minute. And then for innovators that need to be thinking about how do we design AI solutions with communities, because when you do it with communities, you have the opportunity to engage with them, learn from one another, raise awareness, and go through, of course, informed consent processes as these kinds of data protection laws and standards and principles are really, really fundamental to AI. But one of the other concerns that we face across the continent, and in our survey, when we asked people what are they most concerned about, almost 70% of South Africans said they are concerned about labor displacement. They're concerned about AI having an impact on their livelihoods, and people's sources of livelihoods across the continent, across anywhere, are usually labor and wages they may receive, access to social services that might be provided by their government, or subsistence farming. And we know that in all three areas, there are positive and negative impacts from artificial intelligence. But what we were concerned about was where so few people have an understanding about how AI may be impacting their lives, there's little opportunity for people to prepare for the kinds of labor displacements or labor changes that might take place. So we want people to be thinking about what are the kind of skills that they might need or they might want to acquire to be ready for this rapidly digitalizing future. So that again becomes a real kind of governance priority for governments, particularly across the continent.
Love to hear your response to that, Vivek.
Yeah, I think Rachel's made some very important points in how this tussle is playing out today with some very important evidence from the South African context. And as I reflect on that, it reminds me that this is just another chapter in the book of a digitally transforming world that we've benefited from tremendously, but also seen several externalities that perhaps we would have liked to avoid by design had we been able to envision them. And I'm thinking about the increasing use of smartphones for our younger communities, and for some of the types of social media and disinformation for aging and vulnerable populations, as well as young populations as well. And I think artificial intelligence, broadly speaking, has introduced new flavors of these frictions and challenges, but still continue to reinforce the need for education and awareness, thoughtful understanding of the use and the capabilities of these technologies. And so I would very much second the belief of collaborative design, or how we think about it in terms of co-design. And for example, a very beneficial application like supporting field health workers as they go door to door in communities, or support school programs or health programs in their communities, observing them and understanding from them the most salient information that's useful to them so that they can be better at their jobs, and then helping them develop the skills for information literacy, navigation literacy, and managing more complex information. So it really is a tremendous opportunity for raising the levels of and the quality of work that's available to some of these populations as well. And at the same time, there are fundamental risks. Speaking to Atlas AI's own role in this, we support and mitigate some, support the governance and mitigate some of these risks through design as well. So we have an explicit constraint on not receiving personally identifiable information. And so in many of my responses, I've focused at the community level. We're able to tell a lot about the well-being of communities without needing to ingest or receive or monitor data at an individual level, and respecting not just the legal and regulatory requirements, but taking that further to a moral and ethical level, to not being able to target an individual or a household in that sense. On the other hand, we also are very clear and in our agreements with local actors about needing a license to operate pursuant to local and international laws, so that we can further the governance aspects of fair use, and also make sure we're provisioning our technology for beneficial applications.
Great to hear that. I think actually we've come to the end of what we can do here, because we've been speaking for a while, but I had many more questions, but you have been so concise and lapidary, shall I say, in your responses, that we've actually touched on a lot of the things that I wanted to ask you. So thank you so much, both of you. I think we've converged towards a somewhat common view on what needs to be done. But yeah, thank you so much to you both.
Excellent. Thank you. It's been a pleasure to be with you.
It's been really good, actually. I thought that you really fed off each other super well. Like, it's wonderful when I actually don't have to say anything. It's the best scenario.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah. Yeah. And it makes me think that we should keep the conversation going, Rachel. So would love to follow up on and compare notes on what we're seeing, and helping source additional evidence that could inform your higher level policy recommendations and analysis.
Yeah. And I think we're always keen for examples that are not entirely LLM dependent, as
Yeah.
the world seems to have gone generative AI mad. And one of the things we're most concerned with is what are the technologies that's going to enable us to better understand and respond to really, really serious poverty. And this is where I think geospatial data is particularly important, because all the other kind of LLM things depend on people having a phone or depend on people having a smartphone. And, I was teaching a class to students in Cameroon, and they were telling me, their parents charge their phone twice a year. They have a shared feature phone, and it's charged when there is stable electricity, which is a couple of times a year. And it was just such a wake-up call that we can't be designing a set of tools that are only available for people with access to the internet and smartphone.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, I think the example that you used with Togo, the Novisi program for geotargeting, is an exemplar for sure. And there's several other efforts in that area by Give Directly, that the organization that was one of the partners there, as well as others working in that space. And you're absolutely right about this dependence, and which is exclusionary in of itself, like needing the smartphone and internet connection. And there may be ways to make that make the access of some of these models as simple as sending an SMS to and getting a response, which is also being attempted. Yeah. So continued sort of food for thought there on how to make this available.
Yeah. Well, thank you. I feel like I've learned a lot. Thank you for your very easy to understand explanation of complex technologies.
Thank you. It's been great to chat and get to know you.